Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jay Nichols from Child Care Aware of America. We are getting underway with our presentation, and we'd like to welcome all of you for taking time from your schedules to join us on the third of our weekly Child Care Works webinar series. Today, we welcome our guests from the National Association for the Education of Young Children, and for their presentation on what their organization is doing, in particular what they're doing around this year's presidential election. And before we begin, just want to once again remind all of you of this new movement that we just launched a few weeks ago that we encourage all of you to participate in as we show our support to make child care affordable and ensure quality care for all, as well as support the strengthening and development of the child care workforce. And we do this by committing ourselves to improving child care through policy at both the national, state, and local levels. And we will continue to provide weekly presentations from our other friends and allies here in the Washington, D.C. area all the way through the election. But this movement will continue for at least the next few years. And we hope that all of you on the phone will be engaged with your lawmakers, as well as with other advocates in advocating for access to quality child care. So with that, I would like to welcome again our partner for the National Association for the Education of Young Children, NAEYC for short. Based for way of background, NAEYC is a nonpartisan advocacy group, just like Child Care of America, and they actually launched what was called Early Ed for President for this year. That is, tied into this year's election. And joining us on the phone here is Lauren Hogan, who is the Senior Director of Public Policy and Advocacy, and with NAEYC. And in this role, she is responsible for strengthening the connections between research, policy, and practice, while also developing and leading NAEYC's bipartisan early childhood policy agenda with a focus on shared leadership, innovation, diversity, and equity. She also previously served as Vice President of Program and Policy at the National Black Child Development Institute, where she, while she was there, provided leadership for the organization's initiative regarding early child education, family engagement, and literacy. Lauren actually began her career working in an after-school program in Louisville, Kentucky, and was also the director of an early literacy and family support program in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She is a she has earned a bachelor's degree from Yale University and a master's degree in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School. And as I said, she and her family reside right here in Washington, D.C. So, Lauren, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to you.
Great. Hi, everybody, and thank you so much to Jay and to Child Care Aware for hosting us today. I'm thrilled to be with all of you and able to talk about Early Ed for President and what we've been doing and what we've been doing with Child Care Aware of America and so many of the amazing educators and advocates who are out in the field doing this work each and every day.
And Lauren, I apologize. Yeah. Just one more thing. No. I completely forgot, but it's for our listeners on the phone. For those of you joining this webinar, if you have any questions, you should be able to see a dialog box on your computer screen. Please feel free to type those questions, and for either myself or for Lauren, and at the conclusion of this presentation, we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Thanks. I'm sorry, Lauren. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Yes, absolutely. Feel free to type them in, and we can chat as we go along and do conversation at the end as well. Hopefully I'll be able to answer all of your questions. I am just going to walk through a little bit about where some of this Early Ed for President campaign has come from. I'm going to walk through some of the market research that NAEYC did last year that has really informed our work and our messaging around this campaign. It's been an interesting election cycle, as everybody knows, and we keep finding new adjectives to use to describe this year's election cycle. And we've really seen childcare and early childhood education bubble up in the conversations among both major party presidential candidates. And that's been exciting and gratifying and gives us a lot to talk about as we look forward. So when we started out about a year ago, we did a market research project in 4 different phases, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the results that came out of that. You can find all of the research on our website, actually, at naeyc.org/profession. But this part that we did a section that was with early childhood educators, current and prospective, and we did a section with voters, nationally representative sample of about 900 voters across the country. And what we found was, not surprisingly, that more than 6 in 10 voters recognize the ages of birth to 5 as the most important time for child development. This is something that we see reflected in a lot of polls now, but I really think that this data has changed dramatically from 10, 15, even 20 years ago, when I think between the brain science research and the sort of economic case for investment in early childhood, we've really seen a shift in folks' broad understanding of when the importance of really the importance of the early years, and sort of how we've used this to predicate so much of our messaging and so much of our work moving forward. We really focused in our own market research on early childhood educators in particular. So broadly looking at the early childhood education field, but the educators within those fields. How do folks see early childhood educators? And we saw that voters really view teaching young children as important work on par with nurses and firefighters. And that was, gratifying to many of us in the field who spent our time thinking about early childhood educators and really moving from framing it as babysitting to a frame of early childhood education. Really critically, we saw that voters recognized the connection between early childhood educators and early childhood education quality, that sort of link between how we get to quality in early childhood education really resting on the backs of the educators in the center of the classroom. And further, that this quality is really connected to having teachers who are well compensated and having folks with experience, degrees in child development and early childhood education, that this is a field that requires skill and expertise and compensation that is aligned with those skills and expertise. We sort of have come, with many years of longitudinal studies, a lot of economic benefits. Voters have really come to believe that increased access to early education will have broad benefits for society, but we really see that the immediacy of the benefits is easier for folks to believe. So, yep, 91% of folks understand that children have a smoother transition into kindergarten, that they'll enter kindergarten ready to learn. Still, when we get down lower, cycle of poverty will be broken, gaps in achievement will be reduced, local crime and incarceration rates will be reduced. We're still seeing huge numbers of folks who find these plausible, but the immediacy decreases a little bit, even though we know we have the research to back those data up. When we look at compensation for early childhood educators, we find that 61% of voters believe that early childhood educators are paid too little. And this was presented without any context, so they don't know how much early childhood educators make. We actually find that as they find out how much early childhood educators actually make, that number increases, and I have no idea who the 3% who think that early childhood educators are paid too much are. We're going to have to track those folks down and set them correct. But I think when we look too at the 18% of folks who don't know, we really see a real majority of voters who feel that early childhood educators who understand that early childhood educators are paid too little. And, we've been seeing a lot of conversation around wage inequality play out across the election cycle, really having a lot of conversations where early childhood educators are embedded in a lot of these broader conversations. Voters overwhelmingly support increased funding for early childhood education services. Every poll pretty much will find a variation of this information. So we really know that voters, especially when not asked how they're going to be paying for it, are going to be very supportive of increased funding for early childhood education, both at the federal level and the state level. But we really do find that there is enormous support across all parties, and this just really helps drill in on making the case to policymakers, to friends and families, or regardless of party stripes, how much support there is for increased early childhood education funding. If you have 66% of Republicans, that's basically a landslide, and 80% of independents, 94% of Democrats. We do see a gender gap, particularly among voters over age 50, and I think we also see a lot of generational divides playing out this year in the election cycle, particularly when we look at men over 50. It's around 68% of men over 50 who support increased funding for early childhood education. That's, again, still a huge majority, but if we look at sort of the makeup of our political class, men over 50 represent a pretty significant portion of that class, and so it's important to remember that when we think about who we're really talking to here when we're trying to get that increased funding. There's increased early support for funding all across all ethnic and racial groups. 95% of African American voters are the most supportive of an investment in early childhood education, but again, there's really high levels of support across, really the racial, geographic, political lines that often divide us as Americans. We see support for increased funding across parent status, and this is usually a little surprising to folks who expect parents to be significantly more supportive than folks who are non-parents, but we really only see a very mild bump for folks who have children at home, and we think that that is a direct result of much of the messaging that's taken place over the past decades that have really elevated the importance of early childhood education, not just for the immediate child and that immediate family, but for society at large. That people really see the importance of investing in it, regardless of whether they themselves are parents of young children. In one of my favorite slides and bit of data, we find that 82% of voters support an investment in early childhood education with the understanding that it would specifically be dedicated to increasing wages. This was not necessarily a foregone conclusion in the poll. We expected actually that there might be some drop-off in support if they found that the investment in early childhood educators was going directly towards wages, but it really circles back to the data that found that people really understand the connection between early childhood educators and high quality in early childhood education. And if you understand that, then it makes sense that you support an investment in early childhood education that is primarily dedicated to educators. And that's very encouraging for us. We also see the importance of increasing wages across settings, a majority in all settings, but there are differences, and I think it'll surprise nobody that the infants and toddlers and those who work in home-based programs are among the lowest in terms of support for increasing wages across settings. The fact that it took us so many lines to get to all of the settings really tells us about our fractured field and how important it is for us to come together when we talk about the early childhood educators and education field at large. These are just a few of the infographics that we've created and have been using now for several months on our social media sites and in many of our publications about taking the data and really translating it into memes that folks can use. They're on mugs and t-shirts, and we like wearing it around. So we see our educators are heroes. They're sort of, on par with firefighters and nurses. The sense that quality is tied to compensation, that they're paid too little and wages should be raised, and that folks really want to invest in early childhood, emphasizing, the focus on educators within that. Briefly, we asked about why voters would support wage increases for early childhood educators. What are the reasons that they see to do that investment? And not surprisingly, brain development is among the messages that gains the most support. And we really find that brain development is one of those messages that works across parents, policymakers. People really gravitate towards this kind of message that child's brain develops most dramatically during those first 5 years of life. The role models frame worked very well, that educators support children's natural curiosity, their example, they have fun, and not surprisingly, the school readiness frame as well. This sort of tying back to what folks believe about the investment in early childhood education and how it will help prepare children for school. The impact of the messaging, we see that voters are more likely to call early childhood educators extremely important after messaging. And it sometimes seems like this is a case of semantics to go from something that is very important to something that is extremely important. But I think that the 14% jump in movement, first of all, tells us that folks can move in response to messaging. And secondly, we're really looking to activate educators in their advocacy here. And the move from very to extremely important, folks who think that something is extremely important are the folks who are going to advocate for it, who are going to take time out of their lives, who are going to go above and beyond whatever their job is, and who are going to make advocacy a priority in their work. And those folks are compelled by something that is extremely important. It has to rise to that level of priority. And so the fact that we can move people from saying, yeah, this is something I care about, to, yes, this is the most important thing to me, this is extremely important to me, is encouraging and really builds us towards this engagement and advocacy. Which brings us to the Early Ed for President campaign. So this is just a couple of where we are, where you can find us, and I'll go more deeply into this. We're online at earlyedforpresident.org, and we are constantly adding new content. There's a new Get Out the Vote page that just went up this week, and I really encourage folks to go check it out. We're also very active on social media, Facebook and Twitter, and the hashtag EarlyEdIn16 is the Early Ed for President hashtag that's been used broadly by many of our partners in Twitter storms and the like, and so we've been excited to be able to share that and have that be a place where much of this can come together. So Early Ed for President is really the beginning of an ongoing electoral advocacy, and it has been NAEYC's first foray into electoral advocacy, and we've been energized by the members, partners, and advocates on the ground who have really jumped in and embraced the Early Ed for President campaign, working with many national and state and local partners in this work as well. So much of this is about the sort of partnerships that we've been able to build and create with folks like Child Care Aware and others. It is powered by NAEYC, but is really open to all individuals and organizations. It's funded through the 16 for 16 campaign, and we've had many generous donors who have supported that, and you can see a list of some of those folks who on the earlyedforpresident.org website. And the focus has really been dedicated to elevating the conversation around early childhood education and educators. It is entirely 501c3 compliant, so we do not endorse, we do not take a partisan position on any of the conversations happening in the context of the election. We're focused on helping by building skills and capacity to help early childhood educators really become more effective and comfortable in their electoral advocacy efforts. This is new to many folks. It's scary in some cases. Tax status is a real thing. The way that we navigate the line between being a C3 and C4s who are allowed to do very different electoral advocacy efforts is real. And so I think there's a hesitation on the part of many skilled and effective advocates to engage in electoral work. And for educators who have done less advocacy, generally speaking, this can be a daunting task to jump in. And we've really been focused on sort of making this a place where people are comfortable engaging and talking about early education within the context of the presidential race. So we've been keeping folks engaged and updated, newsletters and social media and resources. There's really fun sort of swag online, T-shirts and water bottles and pens and all of that stuff. Mobilizing social media networks and supporting our state and local efforts with our affiliates, expanding electoral advocacy activities. And they've been doing everything from phone banking to voter registration and rallies. And we'll talk a little bit more about the work that they have going underway and opportunities for the R&Rs and other partners on the ground to really connect with those affiliates and elevate their efforts. At the very beginning, we set out some guiding principles and they were really predicated on what we know about early childhood development. So because we know rapid brain development lays the foundation, because we know how important developmentally appropriate practice is, and because we know from the market research that 90% of voters are saying early childhood educators are important members of their community, we believe that every presidential candidate can share a vision for our country in which all young children learn, thrive, and reach their full potential. And this was developed way back when we were in primary season with 16, 17, 19 candidates. We believe that every presidential candidate should be able to articulate his or her ideas and plans for making the vision a reality. And we believe that the ideas and plans, as different as they may be, must meet these following categories. They must demonstrate how the candidate would expand opportunity, support excellence, and value early childhood educators. And what we mean by this is as follows. When we talk about expanding opportunity, we really identify the gap between affordability and quality and compensation, the sort of three-legged stool that makes up the early childhood field and the balance between that. These issues have risen very much to the forefront, specifically when we think about affordability, and the affordability of and accessibility of childcare in particular has become a conversation and talking point within the presidential race. And for us, it's really about this gap. How would each candidate bridge that gap between family supporting educators and educators supporting families, but neither can afford the costs of accessing and providing high quality care? When we talk about supporting excellence, we know that if we sacrifice quality, we will sacrifice results. So the longitudinal studies upon which our field is predicated are predicated upon quality. And so the results that we see from those studies are really achieved when we have the quality behind it. So we want to know how each candidate would be promoting excellence across settings and systems to deliver on the promise of early childhood education. We also talk obviously about valuing early childhood educators. We know that effective early childhood education depends on strong early childhood educators, and we know that voters know that. And so how would each candidate work to attract and retain these highly qualified professionals within our field? This is a glimpse of the website. The top sort of icons give you a vision of what you can connect on about early child. The wins are really a collection of local, state, federal candidate places where early childhood education is really making strides across the nation. The supporter wall is just a long list of names of folks that have signed on to the campaign. I encourage you to join us if you have not already. And the Get Out the Vote page is a new page with some growing resources on what you need to do in order to register to vote. If you're a nonprofit, what rules you need to know about in order to do voter registration activities. Voter registration is actually one of those things that is well within 501c3 rules. And so we're really encouraging affiliates to do a lot of voter registration and voter activation within these remaining weeks of the campaign. Just a couple of looks at sort of what's happening within the website. The website data is actually a little bit out of date, though the social media data is up to date. So it's a little bit closer to 10,000 page views, and a pretty even split between female and male, which you'll see is not true across all the social media properties, and a pretty big geographic distribution when we're thinking about where some of the most interesting races are, where some of the polling is close, really looking at sort of who is focused on early childhood education. We've got over 90,000 likes on Facebook, an average about 500 new likes a day, and over 500,000 impressions per month. This is one of our top posts, and thinking about worthy wages, thinking about the research from the Center on the Study for Child Care Employment, and the work that they've been doing on the Early Childhood Workforce Index. It's a pretty good title. early childhood educators are shaping the future of our country, so why don't we pay them more? And not surprisingly, it got about 4,000 likes and just a ton of comments. People really like weighing in. And so there's a lively debate happening in the Facebook comments pretty much all the time. Pretty interesting demographic age range. We've got a lot of older folks, which is fantastic because they're really engaged and typically vote in election cycles. And so the fact that they're really thinking about and caring about this issue is really important. There's a huge female skew within the Facebook demographics, although I think this has lessened slightly recently. And again, you can sort of look at the geographic distribution of really very much across the country, north, south, east, west, red states, blue states, which has been exciting to see the engagement. On Twitter, we have over 2,200 followers, and this is all within about 6 months. We launched in March of 2016, and we have an average of about 10 new followers a day, and have used, again, the sort of early Ed in 16 Twitter storms during conventions and debates to really highlight some of this work and activity. We had 2 great early Ed in 16 Twitter storms during both the Democratic and the Republican conventions in July. And we're trending, and it was a very rich and exciting conversation happening out in the social media atmosphere. A couple of the demographics on Twitter, also female skewed, but not quite as heavily, and relatively high income on the in terms of the Twitter engagement. These are some of the infographics and images that we've used and focused on. The Republican or Democrat, we won't know for years frame was rolled out during the conventions on both sides. We know her brain will never grow this fast again, and we can't wait to invest in her future. There's a series of those that sort of play on the same messages. We also did a What Will 45 Say campaign focused on what some of the presidents over the past hundreds of years have said about education broadly, especially for some of the older ones, and early childhood education in particular. Many of these quotes have prompted very intense conversations on social media that have really just gotten folks really engaged in the conversations, and that's been fun. On the local, really focusing on affiliates and members. We have biweekly calls with our affiliate leaders, and actually those have gone up to weekly calls in these last few months of the election cycle. We share updates and opportunities, templates, TA on specific topics, and we've really seen, these are just a couple of examples of what folks have been doing, from hosting first ever candidate forums to hosting celebrations during the conventions to meeting with representatives. Many of our affiliates have local and or state conferences, and many of them have been featuring Early Ed for President at those conferences. We have about 5 a week at this point, and they've really taken Early Ed for President and have run with it, from having that as their conference theme to taking selfies and putting it up on social media, to doing voter registration and phone banking in those contexts. And our members have really stepped up to donate, to see NAEYC and our partners in this space, and again sort of engaging on social media on Early Ed for President work. This is another sort of example of the it doesn't matter, early childhood education is a bipartisan issue frame, and the images that have gone along with that. And we're very deep now in the lead up to the election. We all feel like we've been paying attention for years, but many folks have just tuned in. And so really making this push in these last few weeks is incredibly important. The new social media campaigns and marketing are rolling out pretty much every day. And we have very in-depth affiliate action guides that include but are not limited to affiliate conferences. And I'd be glad to talk with anybody on this call, with Child Care Aware, or more broadly about making sure that you guys have access to any tools that you would like to use at the R&R to support as well. We're more than happy to share those, especially around the sort of voter outreach, registration, and get out the vote activities. I'll show you a couple of examples of some of the just really simple resources that we've been rolling out so that folks on the ground can really turn it around very quickly. One thing I want to mention, and this is brand new data, and so you guys are first. You've heard it here first. In case anybody was watching the debate last night, or sorry, no, a couple nights ago, childcare was mentioned in the first 4 minutes of the debate. Notably, it was not mentioned again. And so it really gave us an opportunity to say, like, listen, the fact that it was mentioned in the first 4 minutes is incredibly exciting. It really gives us an opening to talk about it. So then what? How do we build on that? How do we carry that forward? And we did a little bit, another voter survey that just came out of the field. And so these are a couple of data points from that survey. What we really found, a majority of voters think it's very important for moderators to ask questions about early childhood education and child care during the upcoming debates. And we're going to be taking this data and turning it into some social media resources. And I would love to share those with you guys as soon as they're ready. This literally came out of the field yesterday. So to really elevate this and focus, we have 2 debates left plus a VP debate. A majority of voters think that child care and early childhood education have not gotten enough attention in the race. 4 in 10 voters don't have a clear understanding of where presidential candidates stand on early childhood education. And a majority of voters say they would be more likely to support a presidential candidate who supports increasing investments in early childhood education. So these are all real pieces of data that we can use in these last few weeks of the cycle and really encourage our candidates to build on the conversations that they have started having and really focus on early childhood education and what their plans are and how they're going to be supportive of it. So what you can do. In the 6 months since the launch, we've gained over 90,000 supporters. We have new content and campaigns. The bigger the numbers, the louder our voice. And it's really engaged in a trickle down from the road to the White House to the State House and the schoolhouse. Folks are talking about their Senate and House races. Many of the governor's races are up. And this information is really important, accessible, and available to everybody in those contexts. And so we really want folks to be using that, turning that into information they have. So if you or people who haven't joined us yet, we really hope that you will engage with us. You can do that by following us on Twitter, on Facebook, by signing the supporter wall so that you get any additional information. And I'm going to show you just really simple examples of some of the forms that we're sharing with folks who are printing these out for affiliate conferences on voting early ed for president, because I believe in early ed for president. Count me in. This is sort of a printed version of the online sign up for the supporter wall. And we've really had affiliates take these and run with them in the context of their conferences. But we've really focused in the last 8 weeks within the affiliate toolkit, which we've shared with all of the affiliates, and which again I would be glad to sort of talk about sharing with you all as well, because we've really focused each 2-week period has a very specific focus with activities and templates and tools that they can use for that 2-week period. So everything from debate watch parties to this voter registration piece to newsletters, templates, to letters to the editors and op-eds that we've been able to share and create for the affiliates who then are sharing details and sources with each other as well. And so that's something that would like to talk with you guys about, opening up to R&Rs as well for partnership. We really encourage folks to show up at rallies and town halls, reach out to candidates at all levels, with the approach of, the message for us has very much become within a very partisan election, being a very nonpartisan approach within a very partisan election cycle, that the approach and the messaging is really, I know how important early childhood education is, and I want you to know about that too. I want you to know that I'm a voter who cares about early childhood education, and I want you to support it. We encourage you all to join, to partner with, be active in your local affiliates, your state and local affiliates. through voter registration activities, writing op-eds and LTEs, hosting and joining debate watch parties. Do you know, this was the most watched debate. Monday's debate was the most watched debate in history. And I think 75% of likely voters said they were going to watch the debate and then did. So I think folks will continue to tune in, and debate watch parties are a fun and engaging way to sort of talk about early childhood education and really increase folks' focus on this. And again, we encourage you to participate in affiliate conferences as well. Wear Early Ed for President buttons and t-shirts, and definitely post pictures on social media when you do that. The last thing I just want to talk about before we open up to any questions is that NAEYC's annual conference is coming up in LA in California, and I know Child Care Aware will be with us there as well. A couple of the things that we're planning on doing there. It is just a few days before the election, which is being held on November 8th, and so the theme of the conference is Early Ed for President, and we've sort of sprinkled Early Ed for President activities throughout the conference. One thing we'll be doing is phone banking, because I know it hurts a lot of folks who cannot be, who are at conference and are not out knocking on doors during those days, and so we really want to give folks the opportunity to phone bank. The way that we phone bank is we call we call NAEYC members. It is not just calling registered voters or likely voters, but we really call NAEYC members and encourage them to get out and vote. Again, it is entirely nonpartisan. We don't tell folks who to vote for. We won't answer questions about who they should vote for. We just tell them, you know, that this is an important election. Early childhood education is important, and it's important that they vote. We're going to be doing an Early Ed for President walk the phone banking is Thursday of the conference. The walk is actually Wednesday of the conference. Everybody's going to be registering and getting some t-shirts, and we're going to be taking to the streets. A closing session rally where we'll be focusing on a get out the vote station, bands, t-shirts. It's going to be really fun and really just an opportunity to pump folks up before the last few days before the election, and sort of focused on selfie wall and get out the vote stations to really encourage folks to not only plan to vote, but to actually vote. We know that a plan to vote is really important. You need to be registered to vote, you need to plan to vote, but intending to vote is not the same thing as voting. And we really want folks to leave with the message of the importance of voting. I will close with this totally embarrassing the leadership of my organization, who have really embraced this. This is our Executive Director, Rian, and our Deputy Executive Director, Marika, with an Early Ed for President selfie wall at NAEYC's Professional Development Institute, PDI, in Baltimore this year. And this is just one example of the many entertaining selfies that were taken at PDI and that we know will continue at annual, with folks really just embracing and being part of the movement. And we're just grateful for everybody who has become a part of it and who has just really engaged with us and with our partners. So thank you all so much for welcoming me to come and talk about what we've been doing. And I encourage you all to get involved and to be a part of this work on the ground, at the national level, on social media, in whatever ways are comfortable for you. So thank you all again.
Lauren, thank you very much for that presentation. That was excellent. Sounds really, really exciting what you and your colleagues at NAEYC are doing this year. Really appreciate all the information as well as the feedback that you've been brief analysis on the first presidential debate from earlier this week. Yes. To everyone on the phone, again, if you have questions, please feel free to type it in the chat box that should be visible on your screen. Lauren, just right now, we don't have any questions being asked by any participants, but I do have a question that came to mind, and it actually circles back in one of your slides earlier on. You mentioned parents staying at home and how, tying into early education. Well, just so happens there is a federal home visiting program that many folks have been trying to propose not only increase the total number of funds, but also to expand it and enhance it and to reach more children. I bring it up because I'm pretty sure that something, regardless of this election, something needs to be done by March of next year because the funding runs out. And do you have any thoughts on that particular program and how that could be strengthened to help more families?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So the MICV, because we can't help but create crazy acronyms for everything that we do. MICV is the home visiting program, which many of you, I'm sure, know and are connected to in your states, and there's a number of folks who are working on the reauthorization process. I think, we've found that home visiting can really gain bipartisan support, and so it's really an opportunity to sort of talk about the full spectrum of early childhood from birth through age 8, and really thinking about the many ways in which parents, families need to be supported in being their children's first teacher and in supporting their kids' sort of readiness for school and for beyond. And so, we've seen at least one presidential candidate talk about the sort of range of supports for families, from home visiting to paid family leave. And now, both candidates have really come out with plans and proposals to talk about the issues confronting families from paid family leave to childcare. And so I think it does create an opening to talk about all of that in particular.
Yep, so I'm in total agreement with you on that one. Thanks for that, for your answer. And we, as of right now, we don't seem to have any questions from the field. I think.
Well, my email is
I think this presentation
up on the site, so you can feel free to email me directly as well if folks have questions.
Yeah, you can email Lauren directly. Her contact information is on your screen, and you can email me or Michelle McCready and Desiree Timms if you have any specific questions, as always. Lauren, again, thank you for taking time for.
My pleasure. Thank you all for taking time.
For this presentation, we really appreciate it. And to all of you on the phone, thanks again for joining us. Our next joint webinar is a week from today at the same time, and our guests will be the folks from 0 to 3. So again, thanks to everybody. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.